So anyone that is really an introvert and is thinking, no, I cannot be an entrepreneur because I need to be an extrovert, don't think about it that way. Think about it, you can build what you need to build, and these things that you need to do, these activities, whether it's fundraising, team building, all of these things you can do even if you're an introvert, right? Find your flow, find the way that you can do that would allow you to be successful.
Today on the After Your PhD podcast, I'm joined by Dr. Fernando Gómez-Baquero, a leader who's at the intersection of research and entrepreneurship. Fernando is the director of Runway and Spinouts at the Jacobs Technion-Cornell Institute at Cornell Tech, where he helps transform newly minted PhDs into startup founders. The PhD in nanoscale engineering and more than 2 decades of experience in nanomaterials, energy storage, and the economics and policy of emerging technologies, Fernando has worn just about every hat from being a scientist, founder, an advisor, an educator, and a mentor. He's the perfect guest to learn from if you're a STEM PhD looking to become an entrepreneur.
Looking for a job or need extra income in your transition after grad school? With the new After Your PhD job listings page, I'm helping advanced degree holders turn their expertise into income, offering real opportunities and not just networking advice. Whether you're a data scientist, historian, or anything in between, you'll find roles that are truly fit for your background, especially those who are academics and those leaving academia. I try to source positions from Core, Handshake, Skip, which is EdTech, and other future partners who value research-driven skills. If you're interested in learning more about roles for masters and PhDs, please check out the website, or you can learn more in the podcast description below. Thanks. So I briefly introduced the Runaway Startups podcast program just very briefly, but I really would love to get your insight of the goals of the program, kind of what makes this program unique, because I know it seems very innovative from when I'm looking at the website, and some other elements of it. So I just want to leave the floor open for you.
Thank you so much, Ryan, for inviting me and giving me the opportunity to share our programs and all of our knowledge with everybody. So the Runway Startup Postdoc program is a very unique program designed to help postdocs and people that just graduated from their PhD or maybe graduated a couple of years out of their PhD to shift their mindset from that very strong scientific mindset to more of what we call scientific entrepreneurship. So it's really giving them the skills, the guidance, and the support so that they can learn what it is it to think like an entrepreneur. The objective of the program is not that everybody becomes an entrepreneur, right? There's a lot of talk right now. People should be an entrepreneur, and that's great if that's what you want to be in your career. But our objective is to train people that have had many years of scientific training with this other additional complementary superpower or skill. And it's the skill to think like an entrepreneur. And we believe that that is a very important skill to have. That's a very important knowledge to have right now for anyone that is a scientist. And we build this program precisely to help those people that were many, many years embedded into science to make that shift.
Yeah. And when I'm looking at the website, I know there's some different types of degrees. Like, is it like a degree? Like, I guess they're specialized in different fields, correct? And how the applications work.
In this program, we mostly bring people that have completed their PhD or a similar degree. There are some similar degrees to a doctoral degree. The reason why we do that is because it is a postdoctoral appointment. We are literally hiring people. It's a job, and we're hiring them to spend 2 years building their own company. To my knowledge, there's really not other places where they hire you to create your own company. And that's the beauty and uniqueness of this company. And the people that we bring are people that mostly have engineering backgrounds. So there's computer scientists, electrical engineer. We've had mechanical engineers too. We had some neuroscientists, neurobiologists, computational biologists. So for the most part, someone that has some background related to computation. We are very focused on digital technologies. You can call it right now AI. We were doing it before it was called AI, but that's really the bread and butter of what we do very well, helping people with backgrounds that are very engineering, computationally intensive to make that shift towards entrepreneurship.
Yeah, and I know this is very like STEM focused as well. And I do wonder like what makes this program kind of unique compared to any other like academic to startup kind of pathways. I wonder if any of the other Ivy Leagues also have similar programs, like maybe Stanford. Like, do they have these types of programs like currently, or is it sort of like becoming more common?
So many universities have incubation programs, or they have something which is normally called translation. There's different names for it in universities, but for the most part, the idea is that you can get someone that is finishing their PhD or their doctoral degree and help them transition to something like entrepreneurship. The program that we run is a little bit different in the sense that it is a postdoctoral appointment, which normally in a university would be a postdoc working for a faculty member doing the research of that faculty member. But the big difference of our program is that that postdoc that comes here is not working under faculty members, is working under my supervision, the supervision of the director, and then working specifically to build their own company. So instead of having that structure where they are continuing mostly to do research for faculty, they come here and they become independent creators of new knowledge and have 2 years to build a company. And this is not a very common way of structuring a postdoc in any university. There are, of course, entrepreneurial postdocs in universities, meaning people that are at the same time that they're doing the research, they do some entrepreneurship exploration, or they do ICOR, or they do other trainings. But we do believe that it's very different when you are actually doing this entrepreneurship and building your own company 100% of the time for 2 years. That's a very different experience. So in that sense, it is a very different program. And we also pride ourselves that there's some people from other universities that have done those programs, those incubation programs, and then they decide to continue their journey here again, because now it gives them the full-time experience of being an entrepreneur.
And my understanding is like you're filling a gap that's needed, because my understanding is that at least from a lot of PhDs I talk to, like they don't always have like the business sense. Like they have, they're very skilled, like maybe in their discipline, they're very knowledgeable, but it does seem like it's like this gap when it comes to like industry is missing. So I do kind of see that as like filling the gap, and I do wonder like can you talk maybe more on that, like what you like the need you're filling in, and if you see it as like a
I
need, or
think
like how did that come about?
yes, there are two ways of looking at it. I think one is exactly what you said, looking at it as filling the gap, right? And what is the gap? The gap is that someone that really wants to be an entrepreneur but has the scientific background doesn't really have a support system after the PhD to help them fulfill that dream. They might be working really interesting technologies. Very few universities do. Some universities, of course, do. Stanford has a great ecosystem. MIT has a great ecosystem. Harvard does too. We at Cornell have one. But in general, mostly in the US, there's really no training that helps them continue with the journey. You finish your PhD, and all of a sudden you either go to industry or go to academia. Sometimes there's no jobs in either one, and there's no support system. So you can think about it as that gap. The other way that I think about it, and I also, maybe I like this one a little bit more, is that what we're doing is augmenting the educational structure that we give PhDs. So it tends to be that the PhD training, scientifically based, is really focused on long-term thinking, analysis of data, large amounts of data, collecting large amount of data, doing very long technical analysis of that data, publishing on that for very long term. So it's very methodical, right? But the training that we need to give people today, I think, needs to be on both sides of the coin. Needs to be that scientific training, but there also needs to be a training where we help them to make decisions with very few pieces of data. That happens a lot when you're doing business, or make fast decisions again with incomplete data, or being able to structure new things and structure new teams, which is not a knowledge that is given to you when you're doing your PhD. So I like to think about it another way, which is this is an augmentation of the training of a PhD, and the realization that for the people that are doing the PhD, you have to become very good at both things. One is being a scientist and analyzing a lot of data very comprehensively, but also being able to apply that into the real world, which also means analyzing data fast, making decisions fast, maybe not having complete information. So it really is a combination of both things that give the right educational experience. And this is on us as universities to be able to provide that full educational experience, because we have not done that in the past, and we should.
Yeah, and I know there's a lot of people listening that might have an interest in this program. I do wonder, like, what are some things that you're looking for in candidates who are interested?
I think the first thing that we really look at is what we consider to be a great founder market fit. What do I mean by that? We find people that are often obsessed with a particular problem. Right? They've been working in the lab for many years. There's a problem that they're trying to solve. They think that they have a new angle for it. And there's a great match between the knowledge that they have, the science that they built and did and researched, and that application space. So that is really what matters a lot to us. Personality is part of it, right? So there needs to be a personality that has that obsession to solve the problem, just dedication also to solve the problem. All of those things are very, very important. But I think that that match is really what we're looking for. The things that we're not necessarily too concerned about, and it seems crazy, but this is the reality of these early stage startups, is we know that the product is not necessarily something that will be perfectly made. Some of these ones don't even have products made. So that's perfectly fine, right? If there's a product, probably that product will change. If there's not a product, we know that they'll build a product, right? So that's one. The other one is that maybe the market is not there yet, but of course we're betting on things that are big opportunities with opportunities in the future for growing markets. So also the market might not be out there. So it's okay if the product is not there. It's okay if the market is not that clear at all. But what it needs to be very, very important is that there is a problem. There's a big problem. And we are kind of certain that this person has the right skill and attitude and motivation to go and find solutions for that problem. The exact solution might change, but now the dedication to solve that problem. That's what we're looking for, the dedication to solve that problem.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, I would assume that you'd want someone that's very self-motivated, like, because there's probably I'm assuming there's, like, you mentioned about mentorship, but it really does seem like it's really like how motivated you are to really kind of deal with problems and how to kind of keep at it. So I definitely can see that part of it, because it's kind of like how do you get that experience if you don't have the experience? But I think it is kind of down to the problem and if you want to solve it. And I think that's kind of why I also was interested in industry, just trying to find things that were less theoretical, because I'm more of a I'm not STEM, kind of come from like social sciences and humanities, so it can be, I guess, a little bit different, I guess, when we don't have a product per se or like a problem you're solving, but I can definitely see how it kind of works in the STEM kind of context. But I did want to shift more to your personal background, Fernando, because I am very interested in one, like, about like how you kind of transitioned into this type of work, this type of field. I know in your LinkedIn mentions you have a PhD in nanoscale engineering. For those unfamiliar of the topic, like myself, can you maybe just briefly like touch on what nanoscale engineering is, like why it interests you in the first place, and then kind of your journey from academia or maybe aspirations of academia?
Yeah, it's an interesting story. I think that when I take a look backwards, it's been very eclectic, but at the same time, it makes a lot of sense to me. I started as an engineer. I studied industrial engineering and operations research. That was at that point in time what seemed that it was the most bankable career out there. I didn't really know what I wanted to be, but that seemed to be a place where you could get a job afterwards. Did a little bit of economics too. It's kind of interesting that those two things combined right now is what we call machine learning. So maybe I was ahead of the game and didn't realize it. But I was always very obsessed with material science. And this is because I come from a family of scientists. Mother's a chemist, father's a chemical engineer. And I remember that at some point in time, my mother, was a professor of chemistry, started to learn about nanotechnology. And this topic just fascinated me. This was really in the late 1990s, and at that point in time, there was a group here at Rice University with Richard Smalley and other people at MIT that were working on nanoparticles, and I had no idea what that meant. Right? I started to look at a lot of books, and I read a whole bunch of books, and I think I got maybe 1% of the book. But the idea of nanotechnology is that when you start working with the materials that we know, that we see, it could be copper, it could be aluminum, it could be silicon, right? So all of those materials that we know and we see, when you go down to the nanoscopic level, which is 10 to the minus 9, very, very small, all of a sudden, kind of the rules are off. The rules of the normal physics. So the thing that you know that, oh, copper conducts electricity this way, or aluminum conducts electricity that way, or silicon is an insulator this way. All of a sudden, you start manipulating things at that scale, and turns out that those rules change. Things become either more or less conductive, more or less insulating. You can actually tune it sometimes, and I thought that that was fascinating. How is
Sure.
it that
No, it
if
is.
we go to that scale, we now start tuning the performance of these materials, and it just, it kind of grabbed me. I couldn't really, I can't really pinpoint what it is, but it became that obsession that I was talking about, right? Also, I was obsessed by understanding this, and that's when I decided that I needed a lot more knowledge, and was lucky enough to then find a really good group at the University of Albany, SUNY,
Mhm.
in Albany. There's this great center called this point in time was called CNSE, Center for Nanoscale Science and Engineering,
Mhm.
and this is a big semiconductor research cluster. Now it's still part of the University of Albany, and I came there. I did a PhD, and it's basically material science, right? So for the people that are looking into that, but material science is a great combination of physics, chemistry, chemical engineering. So it's a little bit of everything, and it was very
I can
focused
see
on
that.
semiconductors, which, you know, if you want to know what nanotechnology is, to be honest, you just need to take a look at your phone and your laptop. That
Yeah,
computer chip that is
yeah.
there, that is nanotechnology. That's really what we're doing with nanotechnology, trying
Mhm.
to figure out how to tune all of these materials so that we can make that thing that probably has trillions of transistors in it.
Yeah,
I
and
still find
when
it amazing and fascinating.
well, yeah, and when you mentioned like copper and like yeah, and gold and stuff, I was like, yeah, this seems very related to like microchips and silicon chips. So, which is very a very hot topic and very like in demand right now. So, I definitely can see like why that would make sense. And I do wonder like you're doing this field in nanoscale engineering, like seems very like intellectually stimulating. So was there like a moment where you're kind of thinking like I don't want to work at a university and I don't want to work in this field? Like, was there that switch or I,
So it's very stimulating. You're right, to a point, right? Because
yeah, to a
at some
point.
point in time, you are building new materials, and I remember growing nanowires in a reactor, and I
Mhm.
remember seeing these beautiful SEM images of these nanomaterials, and in a mind like mine, you start to wonder, okay, but so what?
Mhm.
How is it that I can take this and apply it somewhere?
Yeah.
It was pretty clear when I came to the US and I was doing my PhD that this was applicable to semiconductors, and that was wonderful because before coming to the States, I had tried to create a company because I was always wondering what is this actually useful for. And I had created a composite materials company in Colombia with
Mhm.
nanoparticles. I had created another company that was growing nanoparticles. Both of them failed quite successfully, right? So, or maybe failed spectacularly. That may be the best way of describing it. So I was always interested in how do we apply it. And then when I came here to the States, I started seeing with my own hand that you could apply it to something very specific. In that case, was semiconductors, and that
Mhm.
just absolutely made sense to me. Is I cannot let this just be paper or research paper or a patent.
Yeah.
I need to do something with it, and so it was very natural transition. I think that it wasn't super I think fashionable at that point in time being an entrepreneur in this. It
Mhm.
was a still very small community. There were great entrepreneurs actually at MIT and Harvard and Stanford, and not as much in the University at Albany, but
Mhm.
we started to work on this thing, and it is just the realization that that knowledge, if you apply it, all of a sudden you're like, wow, you know, this thing could be really applicable. And I ended up applying it in the field of batteries,
Yeah.
because the semiconductor
That makes
space
sense.
was not really the right place to do it. And we found a great opportunity using nanomaterials for battery technologies. And I made a career out of building this in battery technology. So I can understand and I empathize a lot for the journey
Yep.
that a PhD has. I didn't
Mhm.
have the training. I messed up quite a lot trying to figure this out. I
Mhm.
was faking it a lot, right? That's also why
Yeah.
I made a lot of mistakes as well. And but after many decades of doing this, I think that now I understand that need and that drive to see the application, and I always focus on that. I think that most of people that are doing PhDs, at some level, they understand that what they are working on, they want to see it in the real world, right?
Mhm.
And whether that's successful at the end or not, that's a different deal. But going through that process of trying to make it into something real that creates the value that they want to create, I think everybody wants to go through that experience.
Yeah, and I think you mentioned this kind of about training in general, because I do feel like that's worth kind of in terms of the transition. So I know you have very like specialized skills when it comes to engineering. Like I'm sure there's a lot to that skill set. But I wonder like what translated like the best and in terms of like what you're doing now, and was there anything that just doesn't translate now? Like it feels very like very focused on that kind of PhD context, because I know some people like they might still use some data analysis tools, or maybe they do a lot of public speaking. I'm just kind of curious like what kind of is the most useful you find.
I think that this is a great question because most scientists feel that the training that they receive, the science that they're doing, is very different to being an entrepreneur.
Mhm.
And I would love for everybody that is in this podcast to know that that's not true at all.
Yeah.
There are skills that you learn as a scientist that are absolutely necessary and great when you're an entrepreneur. Discipline, the gathering of data, analyzing data, right? So that
Yeah.
relentless pursuit of trying to figure out patterns, those things are amazing. So you get those same skills. And turns out that building a company has a methodology to it. So we have the scientific method when we're doing our research. We also have a way of doing scientific method, which is precisely what the ICOR program that the NSF is supporting. There is a methodology that is very similar to the scientific method to become an entrepreneur and to build a company and to understand if this is something useful or not. So those skills that we got with the scientific method, plus the discipline, plus the analytical skills, are always applicable to being an entrepreneur. So you're much closer than you think as a scientist. Now, the part that changes and where it's a little bit more difficult to create this change is when you're an entrepreneur, you don't have as much time. You need to make decisions fast because the world changes very fast. The applications change very fast. You need to make decisions very fast. That's not normally what you do in science. You need to analyze sometimes not with fully complete data. That's another thing that we're taught that we need to get more data and be very complete. In the
Mhm.
real world, you probably don't have all of the data, and there's a lot of known unknowns and unknown unknowns, both of them, right? So
Yeah.
there's things that
Right.
you really don't know, and you have to make decisions with that, and being able to make those decisions in a fast environment, it's different. So that
Mhm.
part is very different for a scientist. But again, that's something that we believe you can learn by doing it and by living in an environment that fosters that you make those decisions and trains you on how to make those decisions.
Yeah, I was gonna say like when it comes to like social skills, for example, or like even that can be trained because I think we kind of assume that if it's like a hard skill, like those are kind of the more things you can upskill rather than soft skills. But I can definitely see how that's really important, especially in entrepreneurship, because I'm assuming a lot of it is really about connections too, and like building that. I think you mentioned earlier that kind of like the support network to kind of really make the next step to like make those connections.
Yes, and look, there are the scientific mind and a lot of the PhDs, myself included, were introverts,
Yeah,
and I'm not
that's
saying that you need to be an extrovert at all, right?
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
love my introvert people, right? Um, if you're an extrovert, that's fine. If you're an introvert, I still think that you can be a great entrepreneur. You just have to realize that there are things that you do that are very important for that end result that you want to get, right? So the end result that you want to get, if you're going to grow the company, you need to make connections. You're right. You
Mhm.
need to network. You need perhaps you need to do fundraising. Perhaps you need to build teams. So it is part of the of what you need to do, and part of being successful is being able to build those things. So anyone that is really an introvert and is thinking, no, I cannot be an entrepreneur because I need to be an extrovert, don't think about it that way. Think about it. You you can build what you need to build. And these things that you need to do, these activities, whether it's fundraising, team building, all of these things you can do, even if you're an introvert, right? Find your flow, find the way that you can do that. And that would allow you to be successful. So that's I think how we should approach it, right? And I know that there's some personalities that say, I'm not that personality, I don't like fundraising, but there's also different stages of growth in companies. We've had a lot of companies that we built here at Cornell Tech where the founders led the company in the beginning, build the technology, did founder-led sales. They were there, right, building the whole thing.
Yeah.
And when the thing grew a lot, now they said, you know what, this is the time for us to bring someone that has a lot of experience on scaling this thing, and they did, and they're happy about that, right? So it's also the realization of what you cannot do well, and maybe other people would do, but there'll be time for everything, right? So you can be very successful too, even at the point that you end up giving this to someone else, then you become really successful in being able to make that transition.
Yeah, and you don't really get better without not trying. So, I mean, that's a big part of it. You gotta
And
get
and you
extra.
just mentioned exactly, you just mentioned it before, which is very, very important, is you often these people or PhDs don't get the time or the training to try. And it's very important to be able to get the time full on to, and I do believe that it needs to be at least a year, 1 or 2 years full on time to try to do this. The outcome, it can be different. Some of them are going to be CEOs, some of them are going to be CTOs, some of them are going to go back to industry. Even if you go back to academia, you will develop great skills that will help you be a better professor. So having that time to do that in an environment that is good, it's supportive, it's safe, it doesn't kill your academic career either. I think that that's very important. And that's why we do believe that we have a program that is very unique, but we're also sharing it with the rest of the world. And we've had some other universities that now are trying to replicate it because they understand how valuable it is for this particular population that they have there that is underserved.
Yeah, and I could see how like even undergraduates maybe working with a faculty member like if they have that industry experience or that even just through that program, I could see that as a plus because I do feel like sometimes if the world moves faster than some faculty, then I think they might not. They see that as a plus. So I think
Yeah,
that's great.
exactly. And they're
And
just curious, right? And I
Mhm.
I think that this is another thing that we're seeing, and perhaps people that are much younger than me right now are a lot more curious than I was when I was starting this career, right? I always thought that I was curious, but I see people that are just absolutely fearless curiosity, and I love that. I think that that's great. I think that the world has shown them that they can have an impact, they can make an impact. A lot is expected from them, and they are very eager to explore how to apply their skills. And that's wonderful. We have a whole generation of people that understand that entrepreneurship is not a crazy thing. They can do it. They still need support because failure is still a big fear for everybody. In the US, it's less of a worry, but everywhere in the world, I think that people are very, very fearful of failing, and so they need a little bit. They need that support so that they can do that. But it's a completely new generation that is a lot more prepared to build new things for sure.
yeah, no, and I'm glad there is, especially that kind of motivation and that drive. And I have two questions just left before we end. One of them I just wanted to start with is just for those that are maybe like have a PhD right now, maybe they're considering entrepreneurship. Like, how do you know that this is like the right path? Like, how do I know like I should start a business with this? Maybe this in this discipline I was in, STEM or otherwise, or like humanities, social science. Like, what is that thing that should really kind of be the indicator? Do you think?
The first thing that I always ask people, and I think it's the moment of realization of truth, is if there's a particular problem where you get really obsessed, and you really want to understand it. Myself, look, I started with materials. I did a little bit of things here in wind power, and we explored something else in medical. But it wasn't until I came to this topic of energy storage and batteries that I was just obsessed. I thought this is just so interesting. And to the day, today I love, and every time that something comes in, I can read it. It keeps me obsessed. So I think finding something that really motivates you and guides you, and that is the problem, right? So I'm not saying that it needs to be a particular topic, but a problem where you're saying it needs to be solved. For me, it's fast charging. I still don't know why is it that we cannot super fast charge things, and that is my obsession. One day before I die, I want batteries to be charged as fast as possible. So find that thing that really you like and you're obsessed about, and then do not see this path as I need to be Mark Zuckerberg or I need to be Jensen Huang, right? Or I need to be. I think that there's nothing wrong about taking a look at what these people have done and learning from it. But I do think that there is an over idealization of what the entrepreneur is and what it means to be an entrepreneur. And there's a lot of pressure that if you are not 21, dropping out of Harvard, leaving and becoming an entrepreneur, you're now a failure, right? Because, oh, you could have been the next Mark Zuckerberg. So don't put yourself that pressure. Instead of that, just think, what is it that I want to learn? And do I want to give myself the opportunity to explore this type of practical training? It is practical. It's not something that I'll find in a book. It is a practical training, lived training. Do I give myself the time to live this so that I can understand what it means regardless of the outcome? The outcome again can be that yes, I'm an entrepreneur, I build my company. The outcome can be I learned and I just go and work for an industry. That's perfectly fine. So regardless of the outcome, do I want to give myself the time, the space, the knowledge to obsess over a particular problem and understand how to solve it? And I think that if someone evaluates it that way, first off, take some of the pressure off. I think that the pressure is always complicated there, and no one is. Entrepreneurs are their own boss, and they have the toughest boss imaginable, right? Because we're very self-critical. We're very perfectionist, very self-critical, and that's exactly what we're trying to deal with. So don't let yourself be so critical about it. Understand that the path is more important than the end outcome, right? This experience that you're having, and at the end, if there is a topic that you really want to explore, I don't see why this would be something bad for anyone, right? So it is. Uh, Now, with all of that being said, I understand that life is complicated for a lot of people. A lot of things that we deal with is that not everybody has the luxury of doing a PhD full time. Not everybody has the luxury of not earning an income, particularly if you have a family or learning a very basic income. We in our program, we pay our postdocs above what normally a postdoc is gets paid. We even give cash for the company so they're not strapped. So we're very aware of those challenges too. We work with them a lot for their visa situation to make sure that they're okay to be here too. So there's a lot of barriers to this and a lot of worries. So I completely understand all of that, and I'm not trying to minimize that at all. But I think that if you connect with people, yeah. So if you connect with people in the right environment and the right ecosystem, we can guide you towards that and see if maybe you can then take the chance and have this experience.
Yeah, and Fernando, I just want to leave the floor open just for any last thoughts. I know this podcast doesn't go too very long, but do you have like one piece of advice that maybe we haven't covered or that you just like to leave with the audience who we're just really interested in making that transition away from academia?
Yeah, it's. I was thinking a little bit about the title of the podcast, which is After Your PhD, right?
Yes.
Because what I think that is also important to understand is that this could also start before your PhD, right? And I think that that's an important part, right? It is the I completely understand, obviously, that you need to you're doing your PhD, you're working on this, you need to finish and get your dissertation done. But there's a lot of resources that now universities have where you can get either some translational funding, some training, some guidance, some mentoring. I mentioned the ICOR program. The National Science Foundation has fantastic programs that get you a lot of help if you're a researcher and can even give you money to go and travel and meet people. So my advice to everybody that is here is that you don't have to wait until after your PhD. You can really start thinking about this and building an eye structure before you finish your PhD or before the PhD, while you're doing your PhD, so that when you are after your PhD, things are a little bit more clearer. You had more experience, you had more training, you had more background, and now you have more clarity on what you want to spend a couple of years or maybe a decade on doing. So that's my advice, really. I wish someone would have told me, you can start early. And we kind of don't know because we feel that we need to be very focused on what we're doing right now. But I do think that it's good if when either we're doing our bachelor's degree or maybe a master's or early in the PhD career, to start talking about this and start trying to figure it out. It's not going to be a full-time experience, but it'll be good to have all of that time so that you can at the end enter this with a little bit more background and more knowledge.
Yeah, there's never like not a bad time to network, to start talking to more people, to really see what's out there. So yeah, so I really appreciate it, Fernando. It's been a great talk, and I'll be sure to leave a link to the program, to Cornell Tech, because I have a feeling there's probably a number of people there would be interested in kind of learning more about the program, especially if they're in the STEM field.
Absolutely. And also, we have applications open, so please take a look at our website, and we are hiring. So that's always good to hear. and yeah, we'd love for people to check out our website, go to the Cornell Tech, or you can just Google Runway Startup Postdoc Program and at Cornell Tech, and you'll find all our information about the Jacobs Institute and about Cornell Tech and what the program is about, and our link to apply.
Yeah, well, thanks again. Thanks, Fernando.